Hello, I'm Ian Hartitz, lead fantasy football expert at Pro Football Focus, and here's one key takeaway from the first week of training camp for all 32 NFL teams. I know, it's training camp. Who cares? It's not real football. We're going to hear a bunch of beat writers saying everyone's in the best shape of their lives, except Leonard Fournette. We're going to hear a bunch of people saying how great players are performing. We're going to hear a bunch of people telling us about why every single player in the NFL is about to boom. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about injuries, depth chart information, and potential workload management information, anything we can glean from that, because ultimately the best thing we can get during August is where guys are going to be lined up and for how long come September. So with all that in mind, over the last week, I've gone through, basically tried to read every single camp report I can find, every single relevant tweet, and I came away with these takeaways for all 32 teams. In Buffalo, Isaiah McKenzie taking an early lead as a starting slot receiver. This is one of those things where I am breaking my own rule a little bit here because we're talking about a guy just balling out in training camp, making play after play every day. But when we get that constant drumbeat of praise for a player, that's when I'm more willing to kind of tune in. It's not like, hey, look at this one report from Tuesday in the first week of August. But if it's report after report after report from the coaches, from the team, from Josh Allen himself about how good Isaiah McKenzie, who Josh Allen, he caught a little muscle hamster. I mean, come on, guys, what more do we need to hear about the man? That's when I start to get more encouraged by everything. So we heard from Sean McDermott himself, who noted that the biggest adjustment for McKenzie is, quote unquote, potentially stepping into a full-time role and accordingly having teams game plan more heavily for him. So Isaiah McKenzie, he's someone that when he was re-signed this offseason wasn't given this big-time deal, and I think that's what scared everyone off, but they brought in Jamison Crowder. He didn't get a big-time deal either. It's looking more and more likely that McKenzie has a real chance to seize that starting slot receiver role, which yielded over 100 targets in each of the last 3 seasons for Cole Beasley. The Miami Dolphins, so this is an interesting one. Mike Gesicki, apparently not seeing many receiving snaps, doing a lot more work as an inline blocker. Might not be a bad thing, Last year, Mike Gesicki, league high for the position. 92% of his routes came in the slot or out wide. Now we got Tyreek Hill there. Cedric Wilson, Jalen Waddle. I don't think Gesicki is going to get prioritized over those guys. So it's like, okay, do we want to have a competition for targets with Mike Gesicki against Hill, Waddle, and Cedric Wilson? Or do we want him to compete against Hunter Long, Adam Shaheen, and Durham Smythe, like the actual inline Miami Dolphins tight ends? I think he has a far better chance of beating out those tight ends for all the targets if he can get on the field. So with Gesicki, he's someone that we know has the talent to be a great receiver, could be a run-first offense. It is crowded after they brought in Tyreek and Cedric Wilson to join Waddle in the fold. I don't hate the idea, though, of him maybe, just maybe, getting that full-time role as the inline tight end, but this will be another one we need to continue to monitor. With the New England Patriots, James White remains on the PUP list without a clear timetable for return with that hip injury. This is the pathway for Ramondre Stevenson to actually be as good as every single fantasy analyst thinks he can be. Damian Harris is not going anywhere, but that's okay. We want the pass down role in fantasy football. Last year, Damian Harris scored 15 touchdowns. He was the RB18 in PPR points per game. It's stupid scoring. Again, I don't think the pure act of catching a football should equal, 10 rushing yards or 10 receiving yards, but it's the game we play. So if Ramondre Stevenson can really lock down that third down role, having it be a 2-backfield committee with Damian Harris, it's going to be great for his fantasy football stock. Just realize it is the Patriots. Nothing's certain. It could also be Ty Montgomery, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, J.J. Taylor. Still a lot to figure out as we get into the preseason. With the Jets, I would just note that Breece Hall doesn't exactly have this workhorse role wrapped up. I mentioned my workhorse running back article. It's on PFF.com earlier, and the Jets were one of the NFL's most adverse, basically, offenses in terms of not being willing to use a feature back. They had 0 games all season, giving a running back even 75% of the offensive snaps. So I do think Michael Carter has a sort of 3-down skill set to complement Breece Hall very well, but it could be more of a 1A, 1B situation than we're giving credit to. All those advanced metrics that we jerk off Javonte Williams about, and we say this is why Melvin Gordon doesn't matter, and this is why Javonte is just better and he's going to play. A lot of those apply to Michael Carter too. He actually averaged more missed forced tackles per touch, including all the receiving stuff, than Javonte did last season. So, and I'm not trying to say that Michael Carter deserves to go ahead of Breece Hall. God, no. Breece Hall will lead this backfield in touches. Just realize big difference between Breece Hall leading the backfield in touches with 350, like Najee Harris, or, doing more like a Javonte Williams impression last year where we loved the player, we don't love his role as much. With the Baltimore Ravens, J.K. Dobbins is further along in his recovery than Gus Edwards right now. Both guys coming off ACL injuries from last year, and Dobbins, obviously, you average 6 yards per carry. You know, you're a former second-round pick. You're going to get a lot more hype and coverage than the other guy, but this really has been more of a split backfield than most Dobbins truthers would prefer to admit when both him and Gus have been out there. The problem is that per Jamison Hensley, Dobbins is expected to be back by the start of the regular season, but it's uncertain whether he will be at full strength at that point. Edwards is farther behind Dobbins in his recovery and could miss a chunk of the season. So in Fantasyland, I was a lot higher on Gus Edwards earlier in the offseason before this injury timeline became more apparent. Maybe I should have been lower then. Very fair point. The point is, now in August, I cannot get behind Gus Edwards, even going in the RB50s, with the strong chance that he starts the season on the pup. With the Cincinnati Bengals, Samaje Perine still holding the early RB2 lead over Chris Evans. We want this man to happen so bad, and by that I mean Captain America himself, Chris Evans. By the way, nightmare trying to do research on Chris Evans on Twitter. That stupid actor just takes all the fame. But this is actually a quote from head coach Zach Taylor. Perine certainly got a leg up right now in that battle, but that's what training camp is for. Plenty of times guys step up and have huge growth. We'll see where it goes. If Joe Mixon got hurt tomorrow and we had to project the touch leaders in this backfield moving forward, it'd be tough not to give Perine the early edge there in terms of rush attempts. Now, Chris Evans, being a player that's over 200 pounds and has the ability to win as a true receiver, and we saw in the preseason in that Dolphins game, and then again the regular season when he was toasting the poor Lions linebackers out there on him. So Evans still has the best case scenario. No guy is going to have a legit chance at standalone value in this backfield, that's for sure. With the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson has been suspended for 6 games. It has been appealed, though. We'll see what happens in this situation. You can check out the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Myself, Dwayne McFarland, did an entire episode on the impact of Deshaun Watson returning to Cleveland. You know, breaking news, everyone. If Deshaun Watson is active and playing, it's going to be great news for the entire Browns offense. If he's not, it's really going to be bad news, because I cannot overstate that as much as Deshaun Watson from Baker Mayfield, that's a massive upgrade going from Baker to Deshaun Watson. You could argue that difference between Jacoby and Baker is just as big as Baker and Deshaun Watson. I know it's been so trendy all offseason just to hate Baker Mayfield, and, you know, my goodness, how could anyone ever make this guy your starting quarterback? Objectively, pick a stat, any stat, Baker Mayfield far superior than Jacoby Brissett his entire career. With the Pittsburgh Steelers, George Pickens running with the starters and impressing. Now, this has come with Deontay Johnson sitting in for a lot of the training camp. He did just get paid, though, so we'll be back here shortly. And Chase Claypool a little bit banged up with a shoulder injury. But either way, just seeing all three of these guys, you know, cemented in 3 wide receiver sets, it's always been the most likely option, but it's just good to know that this is happening from the beginning. New quarterbacks, not expecting them to be good, but hey, with new quarterbacks, 3 good wide receivers, you start looking at the ADP disparity between Deontay and Claypool, and we've kind of said that might be too wide. Well, when we have Pickens, you know, even wider away from both those guys, might not be a bad idea just to take the cheapest guy involved in Fantasyland. With the Denver Broncos, Tim Patrick going to miss the entire 2022 season with an ACL tear. Absolutely terrible news. Tim Patrick, you know, one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. For my money's worth, his absence now cements Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy in 2 wide receiver sets. And it's also great news for KJ Hamler, who came off the PUP list after having that ACL injury and a dislocated hip last season. So booms for all the wide receivers, and honestly, Albert O and even Greg Dulcich, good things as well. You take away a potential target hog from the offense, it's just going to be good news for everyone. Get better soon, Tim. The Kansas City Chiefs, and guys, Sky Moore healthy and making plays. So it's interesting looking at the Chiefs wide receivers average draft positions, and Juju Smith-Schuster really getting the benefit of the doubt, but man, you start hearing the practice words specifically from Pete Sweeney, Ace Chiefs beat reporter, who said, came into training camp pretty certain Sky Moore was a 2023 guy, beginning to think he may be quite ahead of my assumed schedule. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Sky Moore is definitively going to be the guy in Kansas City, but right now, Juju Smith-Schuster is knocking on the door of becoming a top 24 wide receiver that you have to pick. MVS, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, these guys are going well outside the top 40. So I think based on their opportunity cost to go out there and get them, I am way in on Travis Kelce at the end of the first round, but I vastly prefer Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling to Juju Smith-Schuster at cost. There's a real chance, guys, that each of these guys, Juju, MVS, Sky Moore, and Mecole, rotate as a 4 wide receiver group, might render each each of them as, more low ceiling fantasy options than we're looking for, which, hey, when we're drafting MVS, Sky Moore as wide receiver 4s, that's okay. Not so much when you're taking someone as high as you have to in order to land Juju Smith-Schuster these days. Las Vegas Raiders, we saw it on the Hall of Fame game, and we've heard plenty of murmurs before. This is going to be a full-blown backfield committee. Not an indictment on Josh Jacobs' skill set. It's more so, it's what we've seen Josh McDaniels do his entire life in New England, and it's what we're expecting him to do in Las Vegas. Deshaun Reed, the Athletics Vic to 4, even Yahoo Sports' Charles Robinson have all reported over the course of the offseason that this is going to be more of a committee backfield. Josh Jacobs should be the leader, but man, even 200 carries this year, not a given. Zamir White, Kenyon Drake, even Amir Abdullah, maybe even Brandon freaking Bolden could also be involved in this committee. That is not what we're looking for in fantasy football. We can live with 2 running back backfield. This is not 2000 anymore. Once you get to 3 or 4 guys involved during any given week, usually a situation you just want to stay away from, especially in regards to a guy still costing you legit RB2 draft capital. With the Chargers, RB2 job remains a wide open committee. This is one of the things with training camp, guys. We got to be so careful because we'll see one viral tweet and we won't even see the follow-up. So there was a report last week from an NFL Network reporter basically saying that Isaiah Spiller, their rookie out of Texas A&M, was the only guy getting actual run with the starters other than Austin Eckler. And it wasn't true. And the reporter came back and quote tweeted their own tweet and said, hey, Larry Roundtree, Joshua Kelly, they're actually also getting run. This is still a wide open competition. The follow-up tweet got about 60 likes. The original tweet got about 3,000. So it's one of these things where you really do need to make sure you're covering your bases. You're looking at the entirety of training camp, not just one standalone story. So I do think Isaiah Spiller deserves to be the favorite in this situation, and he's a fine enough target in fantasy land, in the RB4, RB5 range. Just realize this competition is not done just yet. With the Houston Texans, unfortunately, John Mechie will likely miss the entire 2022 season as he battles leukemia. Absence means that Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, and Chris Conley now the favorites to start in 3 wide receiver sets. We always project Brandon Cooks for a monstrous target share. Maybe, just maybe, Nico Collins, though, kind of going in that DJ Chark range, could also give us a nice boom. Look, if we have big, fast receivers that are starting in an offense, I understand it's Trevor Lawrence, or in this case, it's Davis Mills, and before we were talking about Jared Goff. Not ideal quarterbacks, but guys, when we're taking a wide receiver, going in the wide receiver 70 range, it's tough to check every single box. We got talent, we got the offensive environment, and we got opportunity. Like, those are the 3 kind of factors we're looking for. And everyone, my first round pick, I want 3 check marks in each of those boxes, basically. Round 14, round 15, if you can only get 1 or 2, that's okay. Indianapolis Colts, the Nyheim Hines chatter will not die down from Stephen Holder. Frank Reich told us before that he would draft Nyheim Hines to his fantasy football team. We do need to kind of look at Hines as a realistic possibility in a similar manner to Tony Pollard to actually get more run as a true receiver this year. He did rank 4th among all running backs in routes in the slot or out wide in 2021. And when you look in Indianapolis, yes, Michael Pittman's great. Paris Campbell's healthy for now. Alec Pierce, more of a field stretching option. The same thing with Ashton Dulin. There is a chance that with Matt Ryan under center now, far more fantasy-friendly quarterback for checking it down to his running backs, we see Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor do their thing. Tennessee Titans, Treylon Burks and Robert Woods are both fully practicing. Woods coming back from the ACL last year, Treylon Burks having the conditioning asthma issues in OTAs. So looking good. It's still going to be this run-first attack, but there's a lot of people out there. They look at McCaffrey, they look at Henry, and they just say, too much workload, they're too old, whatever the excuse is, they're just going to get hurt. If Derrick Henry gets hurt, guys, are they really going to turn the offense over to rookie Hassan Haskins, or is Ryan Tannehill going to take on a bit larger workload and actually get to air the ball out a little bit? 2 guys like Treylon Burks and Robert Woods. So I know they didn't do it last year, but that was also because Julio and for large portions of the season, A.J. Brown were out at the same time that Derrick Henry was. So just something to keep in mind there where, if you find yourself in a draft and you don't have Derrick Henry, maybe, take a longer look at these very affordable Titans wide receivers. Jacksonville Jaguars running back James Robinson is not on the PUP list with that Achilles injury. So shockingly, quick recovery from last December's torn Achilles demonstrates just how awesome modern science happens to be these days. In regards to what the split's going to look like with him and Travis Etienne, ESPN's Michael DeRocco actually noted the following about it. Educated guess, Robinson has more carries than Etienne, but Etienne could have a slight lead in total touches by the time the season ends. That's fine. We want the targets for ETN, that is. Robinson, he's someone where I still need to kind of see him out there to believe that he's going to have a realistic chance at giving us great fantasy value, because I talked about the Detroit Lions splits. That's what I'm expecting here in Jacksonville. James Robinson as the Jamal Williams type of player, and Travis Etienne working basically as the DeAndre Swift. And full PPR scoring, historically, we've seen one target be equal to about 2.7 carries in terms of expected PPR points. Travis Etienne, apparently the most explosive player at Jaguars camp, should have every opportunity to do just that. So hope you guys enjoyed part 1 of every single training camp takeaway for all 32 teams. We'll get to the rest of them in the next video.